Well, we will see, because I have St. Louis in the number 7 spot, actually, and there's a team on the hat that Harper is wearing that's going in the number 6 spot for me, and that's the Arizona Coyotes.
You're now listening to the Boys in the Booth podcast with your hosts, Harper Cody, Chad Melbourne, and Casey Abrams.
That's a big one.
Yeah!
Good evening and welcome to the Boys in the Booth podcast. This is episode 181. Cody, Abrams, and Melbourne with you for this one as our division rankings continues heading into the 23-24 NHL season. We're going to be talking about the Central Division in this episode. We talked about the Pacific last week. If you haven't done so already, you can go and listen to that episode wherever you get your podcasts. But before we get into everything, boys, how we doing?
Doing good, Harp. Just trying to fit in as much golf as I can in these last 2 months before I can't play anymore. And I got out 3 times in the last 4 days, so it's going good.
Holy, I feel like I haven't golfed in weeks, man. You're making me jealous. I need to get out at least a few more times before, the snow comes, because we're getting towards that time of year. I'm doing well generally. Just wanted to say I'm not exactly sure how the hockey world feels about Mike Babcock today. It seems to be mixed messages, and I know you guys were talking about that earlier, so just wanted to bring that up. Not sure. Do we hate him? Do we love him again? Who knows? Anyway, Harp, how you doing?
I'm good, man. Speaking of the golf thing, I haven't played in a little bit as well, so definitely want to get in a few more rounds. I know that my brother and I are talking about doing some kind of scramble thing first weekend of October. If you guys are around and want to get in on that, by all means. But, something like that I think would be good to finish off the season, so hopefully get out a few more times. Yeah, the whole Babcock thing, interesting today, but maybe we'll talk more about that when we focus on the Metropolitan Division next week. But anyway, doing good and getting closer to the hockey season.
Yeah, it's just a great time of year because we're only maybe a week away from preseason, maybe a week and a half, 2 weeks away from preseason. So we're at training camps right now. The Leafs just announced their Traverse City lineup with all of the prospects for that. So exciting times, and certainly looking forward to the NHL season and fantasy as well. But before we get into this episode, we're going to talk about the Central, like Harper mentioned. I wanted to do another one of my fun little games, which I know you guys just love so much. And what we're going to do today is a snake draft of the top 6 defensemen in the NHL coming into the 2023-24 season. So Harper, I'm going to go to you first, then Casey, then myself for the 3 and 4 pick, and we'll do it as a snake. So Harper, who is the best defenseman in the NHL? It's a bit of a lob ball.
Well, it's Cale Makar, of course, of the Colorado Avalanche, and health obviously is a big factor for him. He was pretty banged up for a significant amount of time last season, and I think if he can stay healthy and play a full 82 games or close to that, this guy's got a chance at the Norris Trophy for years to come yet. And that $9 million looks like an absolute bargain for him already. So Cale Makar, number 1.
Yes, the only defenseman over the last 3 seasons that is above a point per game, and we thought he had a down season last year. We haven't seen anything yet. Casey, who are you taking at number 2?
It's funny, I don't think number 2 is as clear as number 1, but I think I'm going to go with Adam Fox. As much as I love to hate on the guy and I love to hate on the Rangers, he's dynamic back there, moving the puck as well as playing defense. I don't think people give him enough credit for the defensive side of things, but he's up near a point per game every single year, and he seemingly came out of nowhere and is now definitely, in my opinion, the second best defenseman in the league.
Yeah, that's a good pick. I also had Fox at number 2. That's where I would have gone if I were in your position. Number 3 and 4 to me now. Number 3, I'm going to go with Roman Josi. He's second in points among defensemen over those last 3 seasons, like I was mentioning, even though Cale Makar is far above in terms of points per game. But Roman Josi in the 3 spot makes a lot of sense. just one of the best all-around defensemen in the NHL and has that incredible offensive upside as well. Number 4, here's where it gets really tricky for me because there are a lot of guys who could fit into the 4, 5, 6 spot, but I'm going to go actually with Rasmus Dahlin. And I know Harper wouldn't have brought up Dahlin. I feel like he's too nervous to have a hot take like that on the pod. He might seem biased, but I think Dahlin has solidified himself in the upper echelon of defensemen in the league. I know I haven't mentioned a guy like Hedman or McAvoy or Heiskanen or Carlson, who won the Norris last year, or Dougie Hamilton. All of these guys are good defensemen, but I have to go with Josi at 3 and Dahlin at number 4.
Okay.
Yeah, love it. And is it me now, number 5?
Nope. Going to Casey for number 5 here.
Sorry,
You know what? Eventually Harper will learn how the snake draft operates. But yeah, Casey number 5.
Exactly.
Yeah, I'm having a tough time here. I feel like Erik Karlsson's a lob ball here, but when I think of the last few years and maybe the years to come, I'm going to pivot. And I think I will go with Charlie McAvoy. Probably the best two-way defenseman that we've mentioned, in that he plays the game so well in his own end, as well as contributes offense. And I expect him to contribute even more this year because they're going to need it from him. So he was only in the high 50 point range last year, but he's just so good defensively, and he's going to shut down any top line in the league. Except for maybe a McDavid out there or something like that. But I just would feel so safe having him on my team on defense at all times. So I'm going to go with Charlie McAvoy.
Yeah, that's a good pick. Like I mentioned, there were 4 or 5 guys who would make sense for number 5 and 6. And with that being said, Harper, who are you taking as the 6th best defenseman going into this season in the NHL?
Yeah, my bad. I'll pay more attention the next snake draft. I'll get it right at some point, boys. But anyway, yeah, it gets tough at this point. But I got to go with Miro Heiskanen. Chad, you mentioned him a moment ago. 73 points last season. That was a career high for him and was certainly in Norris conversation. I did think that NHL Network had him a little high in that list that they came out with this summer. I know you guys saw that as well. But I mean, it's only a matter of time before this guy wins a Norris as well, and he definitely is the catalyst on that blue line for a very good Dallas Stars team that we're going to be talking about in this episode. So, yeah, absolutely, Miro Heiskanen to finish it off.
Good pick. No bad picks there. I mean, we're missing a guy like Hedman, who I feel like after a down year last year, maybe we're underrating him a bit going into this season. I don't think he's washed up quite yet, guys. But I mean, we're all at fault for that one. He's still going to be a good player. Erik Karlsson coming off the Norris Trophy, one we didn't mention. Dougie Hamilton also up there in terms of his two-way play. So those are 3 guys that I thought could have been on the list, but just missed out.
Yeah, for sure. Another guy who, I think misses out, but I would put him in the top 10 is Quinn Hughes as well, and just became captain of the Vancouver Canucks, as we know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, stalling tactic for sure.
Yeah, exactly. I wonder why. All right, let's get into it, boys. So our preseason predictions, rankings for the Central Division. So, of course, wrapping up the Western Conference with this episode. And I got to say, I agree with a lot of the talk around the Central heading into this season. That outside of 2, maybe 3 teams, it's kind of wide open from there a little bit. In the middle there between 4 and let's say 7. It's kind of wide open. So let's get into it here, and starting with number 1 at the top. In Case, we'll go to you first.
What's up, guys? Thanks for making it this far into the podcast. We hope you're enjoying the show so far. I just want to let you know that we're still doing a limited time merch drop over on boysinthebooth.com/shop. We're selling t-shirts, long sleeves, hoodies, crew necks, sweat shorts, slides, you name it. We're selling it at boysinthebooth.com, so head over there and check it out when you can. Every single purchase allows us to improve the quality of our podcasts going forward. Plus, you get to wear some awesome gear too and support the boys. So we'd really appreciate it. Thanks, guys. This podcast is sponsored by Liquid IV. Whether you're staying active or nursing a hangover, Liquid IV has you covered. Just one stick of Liquid IV in 16 ounces of water hydrates faster and more efficiently than water alone. There's plenty of awesome flavors, but my personal favorite is lemon lime. Get 20% off when you go to liquidiv.com and use the code boys_in_the_booth at checkout. That's 20% off anything in the store when you order using the promo code boys_in_the_booth. Experience better hydration today with Liquid IV. This podcast is sponsored by the best ticket app out there, SeatGeek. SeatGeek takes the confusion out of buying tickets, making it quick and easy to get the best deals on tickets to your favorite sporting events. Plus, Boys in the Booth listeners get $20 off their first ticket purchase on SeatGeek with the promo code Boys in the Booth in all caps. So click the link down below to download the app and remember to get your discounted tickets using the code Boys in the Booth in all caps. Get great seats for a fraction of the cost with SeatGeek.
Yeah, it's interesting with the Central. There's definitely been a lot of talk about how open it is, but I don't think it's nearly as open as we were talking about with the Pacific, where I'm pretty locked in at 1 to 3 personally, and 4 and 5, you could flip those two. 6, 7, 8, I'm pretty locked as well. So I'm kind of against the general consensus here. But for number 1, I don't think there's any surprise here based off my history and the color I have behind me. If you're not watching a video, that is green, because I believe the Dallas Stars are going to win this division, and they're going to finish fairly high in the whole league. I just really love their ads this year. I think Duchesne is a ridiculously sneaky pickup and is going to contribute very good, or a lot of goals at least. You know, he's only 1 year removed from a 40-goal season, but when I look at the offense, this team has kind of always lacked star scoring since the kind of, I'll say, downfall of Ben and Seguin, except they seem to be back last year at least. Even when those guys were really clicking, like the Art Ross season from Ben was still in the 80-point range. So they've always lacked that star scoring. Well, it's here now. Robertson is that star scoring. Roope Hintz is right up there as well. If he can play a full season, he's going to be in that 80, 90-point range, no problem. So they have the star scoring, but talk about depth on this team. Their forward core is stacked top to bottom, and then they still have young guys trying to crack this team like Logan Stankoven. Like, I'm really hopeful that he can be a top 6 mainstay, and then I love this team's bottom 6 even more, because that pushes a guy like Duchesne or Dadonov or Seguin down to the bottom 6, and then they get even better. I mean, they had 5 players over 70 points last year, 7 20-goal scorers, 1 left in Domi, but 1 comes back in Duchesne. And then they had 2 30-goal scorers and then J-Rob at 46. So goals is not going to be a problem with this team whatsoever. And then again, Duchesne, that only adds to it. 4th best goal differential in the league last year. That's something to keep in mind, because they don't only score goals, they keep it out of their net. And this D-core is deep. Heiskanen is a stud. Harp just took him as the 6th best defenseman in the league, and I can agree with that. He's one of the best skating defensemen in the entire league for sure, yeah. And I love watching him move the puck. It takes a bit of a step back from Heiskanen, but 2 to 6 are still very strong on this team. It's a deep D-core, so I'm happy with that. And then Ottinger, we've already ranked him very high in terms of goaltending this year. Harper maybe a little too high, but you know, I can get behind it. He was great last year. I think he's going to be even better this year. He's going to play a lot of games, but they still have Wedgwood, who was a very competent backup last year, maybe the best year of his life. So that had them at 5th in save percentage last year. So goaltending, obviously not a problem. Their power play was 5th in the league. Their penalty kill was 3rd in the league. I cannot find a problem with this team. So that's why I have them winning the division.
Okay, I had a feeling you were going to pick Dallas to win the division. I actually picked Colorado, not Dallas, but I even mentioned in my notes that I was very flexible to go 1 and 2 for those 2 teams in particular. I'll stick with Dallas just for the sake of this opening conversation. But the reason I was between those 2 teams is because last year Colorado finished with 109 points, won the division. Dallas finished with 108 and came in second place. So these two teams are pretty much equal in my mind. They both made some big additions. You mentioned a lot of them up front. I love their forward group. It's maybe one of the deepest in the league. They have a great mix of young players and veterans. So the forward group, I think, is better than Colorado's. But my one concern and why I put Dallas number 2 is just the defense. You already kind of alluded to it. Heiskanen is far and above the best defenseman on this team. But then I am kind of the opinion that after that, the drop-off is more substantial than people are giving it credit for, because I don't think a player like Esa Lindell is as good as he once was. Same with a player like Ryan Suter. I don't know. The back end just doesn't look as scary to me compared to Colorado's, who might have one of the best back ends in the league, in my opinion. So that was the big difference for me. And then goaltending, while I do think Dallas's is better going into this season, I think that's only because Ottinger is so good. And Wedgwood, of course, had a good year last year. I expect him to be a full-time solid backup this season as well. I just think with a tandem situation of Georgiev and Francouz could be a better situation if one of them gets hurt, as opposed to in Dallas, if Ottinger gets hurt, that's kind of, that could be their season, or at least could have them not finishing in first place. So for those reasons, I had Colorado number 1 and Dallas number 2, but I am flexible to go back and forth. I'm interested to hear what Harper has to say about Dallas, though, and where you picked them.
Yeah, well, I've got Dallas winning this division as well. I do, although very fair arguments against them winning the division and moving down to number 2. It's one or the other, right? It's Colorado or Dallas's division, and then we'll see where everything else falls. But I got to give the edge to Dallas. Just so much firepower up front. Matt Duchene for $3 million. Are you kidding me? Yeah. On a 1-year deal? I mean, that is just going to be fantastic, I think. I can't see how it wouldn't be. Jake Ottinger, you guys know I'm high on him, and just, the guys that they have now that are going to be there for a long time, and the guys that they have coming, just the multiple layers and everything. This team is going to be a contender for a long time. But it's interesting what you mentioned about the back end, because I do agree that, a lot rides on Heiskanen. There was talk about Ryan Suter possibly being bought out in the offseason. He didn't look great in the playoffs. So I'm looking at Thomas Harley on the blue line being able to really take a step. He was a first-round pick, and that he's going to have a bigger role. Again, we've seen that Dallas has been able to bring in so many talented kids that have just emerged as stars for them, and I think that Thomas Harley could be the next one. So we'll have to see, but this team is a Stanley Cup contender, Final Four appearance last year, and so I got to give the edge to Dallas at number 1.
Yeah, I mean, when I'm looking at the decor, I think about how it's essentially the same as last year. Sure, Suter's older, but Heiskanen's older, and that's going to be very crucial for them, as well as Thomas Harley and a couple other players. But I think that Esa Lindell is an underrated defensive defenseman. I don't think that he's contributing much on the offense, but I don't think that they need that when you look at the forward core. And it's the same as a Hakanpää, who is a very, a bruising defensive defenseman. And then you have Harley and Heiskanen that can move the puck. Maybe they add one more defenseman that might be beneficial to them, but I'm really not that worried about their D-core. And then when I look at Colorado, I think that they lack a 6th defenseman on that team. I think that Jack Johnson's a 7th at best. So they might be lacking there, as well as I trying to remember the analytics of Girard, but I'm pretty sure that he has an unfavorable outcome in the advanced analytics whenever he's on the ice for Colorado. So that bottom pair does give me a little bit of worries, where I don't think any pair on Dallas is going to give me any scare. And it is the same as last year. And again, 4th best goal differential in the league. Sure, Ottinger probably had a lot to play in that, but I think that the defense of this team as a whole is what really, holds them above Colorado. And then when I look at Colorado, if you want to kind of get into them, because I do have them at number 2. I look at a team and I see a team that has a lot of new faces. So it's a little more difficult to look at them last year and try to gauge where they're going to be. Of course, they have the core together. They have the defense is kind of stuck together. So there is that. But I think there's 5 or 6 new faces on forward for them. So I'm a little curious to see how that can work out. I really hope that Drouin can finally find his legs on this team and get back to, where we expect him to be. He's going to be playing with McKinnon again. That's that dynamic duo from Major Junior. So that's going to be fun. And I do like all their ads. I think that Wood can be an effective player in a different jersey than New Jersey. I love Ross Colton as a kind of third C. I think that's going to be great. I think that he's going to be another one of those players that may succeed from moving away from Tampa Bay, as he's going to get more ice time. But I also see some gaps that have been left in a Evan Rodriguez and a JT Compher. You're going to need Ryan Johansson to be a JT Compher, and I don't know if he is that guy. You're going to need Thomas Tatar to come in and be an Evan Rodriguez, which I think that's more likely. 20 goals, I think 48 points last year. He's a plus 41. So he does have a good impact, but he's not a line driver. Evan Rodriguez was kind of driving that line last year, whereas Thomas Tatar, he needs someone cutting up the middle with speed because he lacks that speed. He has some good IQ and good hands, good shot, but he lacks the speed for sure. Moving on to the defense, I do love, that top pair is probably the best in the league. And they do have a good second pair if Bowen Byron can stay healthy, playing along with a name blank Josh Manson. Don't skate with your head down when he's on the ice. No. But the bottom pair does give me a little bit of worries. Goaltending was fantastic last year. I'm not worried about them at all. Now they kind of have that 3 goalie rotation we've talked about before that you need to be successful in the NHL. As long as Noonan can take another step forward, he kind of struggled last year at times. This team, I think they were 8th in goal differential last year. Their power play was 6th. But their penalty kill was 17th. So I do give the nod to Dallas because they're still the same team with, Duchesne in the mix and Sam Steele playing in the bottom 6 and then some younger guys cracking the roster. So I just like Dallas a little bit more, although I think Colorado is a lock at number 2.
Yeah, I also agree that they're a lock at number 2. Like I said, I was pretty flexible to go either way, 1 and 2. And I agree with a lot of what you said. I think Duchesne is a sneaky good ad for Dallas. And I guess between these two teams, Dallas got the better former Pred in Duchesne as opposed to Ryan Johansson in Colorado. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it shakes out. I'm okay with doing that. Dallas number 1, Colorado number 2. You mentioned a lot of new faces. That's something I didn't really take into account. I liked a lot of their ads, but chemistry is, of course, always can be the end-all be-all when it comes to scoring. So it'll be interesting to see how a player like Tatar does, given the fact that, he was just signed today. So he didn't even know where he was going to be playing until literally a few hours ago. So, but I do think that's a good signing. And I'm surprised it took this long because he's a good player. And I think he'll be a good middle 6 scoring option for them and maybe even get some power play time on the second unit. So all of that being said, even though Colorado is going to be without Landeskog again this year, unfortunately, I think they have gone shopping in the discount section and come out with some pretty good finds in terms of the players that they picked up. So number 2 in this division makes so much sense.
Yeah, absolutely. They've gone shopping in the clearance section and they've added some pretty good bodies. It'll be interesting to see how everybody gets acclimated, but they're all good players that they've added. The Woods, the Tatars, Drouin. I'm really curious to see him. I think that this is going to rejuvenate him a little bit, getting out of Quebec and reuniting with Nathan McKinnon. Look, they're only a year removed from a Stanley Cup. Cup. And after a full off season where everybody can get healthy, they were so banged up last year. Injuries almost ruined this team last year. And there was fear, kind of late in the season, whether or not this team was going to make the playoffs. And so I feel like, health is a big thing. A lot of new faces, but, the core of the team is still there. And like I said, they're only a year removed from a Stanley Cup. And that could be a three-headed monster down the middle. If Johansson can stay healthy with McKinnon and Ross Colton, he's a hell of a player. That could be quite the center core down the middle, and that could work out nicely for the Avs. So yeah, number 2 in this division.
Cool. Move on to number 3, shall we?
Yeah. Let's get into that to that number 3 spot, and for me, this is where it kind of gets interesting. Although I have a feeling that we may all have the same team in the number 3 spot, but let's get into it. Case?
Yeah, I actually have Minnesota at number 3, and really, I have them as the last playoff team in the Central, perhaps, because the Pacific's got, a good chance at taking both of the wildcard spots, although, I wouldn't be surprised if it gets split. Minnesota, a lot of subtractions from this team and not a lot of additions, other than obviously young guys coming into this lineup, but somehow the subtractions did not really affect any of the goal scoring, and I think that kind of eased my mind a little bit when I looked into it a little further. It's usually a team that is score by committee. They had some guys step up 2 years ago that, kind of shocked us in a Foligno and Hartman being, kind of leading it. But now they have Kaprizov and Boldy, who are that star scoring. Zuccarello somehow in the last 2 seasons has just avoided Father Time and is just putting up unbelievable numbers. So they still have him as well. And then there's lots of depth on this team. A lot of guys can contribute and at the meantime play some meaningful defense when it comes to forwards. One thing that kind of worries me about this team is I think they lack a true number 1C. I don't think that's a bold take at all. And I think that's everyone's opinion of this team. So it'll be interesting to see, if a Marco Rossi can reach that potential within the next 3 years, or if they're going to have to go out and find someone. And when I look at the back end, I mean, kind of no surprise that Minnesota has a good decor. I think it's always been the case, but I thought that it was going to take a step back, losing Adamba and Klingberg this year. But there's 2 guys that stepped up last year and are going to replace those spots, no problem. Middleton has really stepped up as a fantastic defensive defenseman. I think he led the team in hits and blocks last year. He's going to play along with Spurgeon again, and that's going to be a great shutdown top pair. Callan Addison is another guy that stepped up big time last year. Some say that, maybe he needs to work on the defensive side of being a defenseman, but I looked into the analytics and he had the highest share of goals for on this entire team at like 66% of the goals scored were in favor of Minnesota when he was on the ice. So I think that, he's going to have another big year if they can get him signed. I think he's an RFA right now. And then Brock Faber is going to come into this team and fill in that last spot. So I do see this as still being a Minnesota strong defensive core. And then goaltending, question mark as always for me is, can Gustafson be that guy again? He was fantastic last year, 7th in goal save above expected. I don't think anyone saw that coming. So interested to see if he can be that guy again, and if Marc-Andre Fleury is also another player on this team avoiding Father Time. Special teams were pretty middle of the pack last year, and I would expect the same out of them this year. So I have them at 3. I'm fairly confident that they'll be 3rd in this division. You guys can try to convince me otherwise. I think it's a strong team, but they lack the wow of a Colorado or a Dallas Stars.
Yeah, I agree with Minnesota in the 3 spot. I have them as my 3rd and final playoff lock in this division. After that, I have a tier of 1 team where I've called it a playoff hopeful tier. And then I have a tier after that consisting of 3 teams that I have called playoff bubble tier. And then I have 1 team in the very bottom tier in the 8th spot called lottery tier. So I guess you guys can guess who that is. But yeah, the number 3 spot for Minnesota makes a lot of sense to me as well. I agree with a lot of what you said, Case. They don't have that high-end scoring outside of Kaprizov and Boldy, which, by the way, Boldy, I don't think gets enough credit around the league. For such a young player to come in and score at the pace that he's done, it's just incredible. Yeah. And I think Minnesota's hoping that Marco Rossi can be that player coming in this season for them. Marco Rossi's played 21 games in the NHL. He only has 1 point to show for it. But in the American League, he's about a point per game and has been ever since he stepped on to that North American ice, which is insane. So clearly that production isn't just going to fall off entirely. It'll catch up. He'll be a productive player. It just takes time, especially when you're a bit undersized. So I'm not overly worried about that, and I'm expecting Rossi to take a step as a middle six forward for this team this year. But with all that being said, it's kind of crazy that this team lost a defenseman of the caliber of Matt Dumba, and their D-core looks just as good, and you're not worried about it at all. So I'm not worried about the back end on this team. And then in terms of goaltending, Philip Gustafsson was a really good goaltender in Ottawa in a limited sample size the year that he was traded. I believe he was hurt for like half of the year or something leading up to that trade deadline. And so they didn't really know exactly what they were going to get in Minnesota, but ever since he's arrived, he's been exactly what this team needed. Now, I do think they'll go to a tandem situation again with Marc-Andre Fleury, but just think too, like, room has to be made for Jesper Wallstedt coming up, whether it's this season or next. So I don't know exactly what they're going to do with Fleury, but I think he's the clear number 2 now, whereas last season he was maybe a 1A in a 1A, 1B situation, whereas now I think he's the 1B or just the backup. So again, all of that being said, I think Minnesota is not a lock for the playoffs, but I think they're comfortably at number 3 in my mind. Harper, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I agree with what a lot of you guys said there, and I have the Minnesota Wild locked in at 3 as well. Obviously, it sucks with the dead cap money from the Parise and Suter buyouts, but you know what? It didn't seem to impact this team too much. You've got your 2 stars up front in Boldy and Kaprizov. It'll be interesting to see what Marco Rossi can do, and they've got some really good underrated younger players in that forward group as well. The Duhaimes, the Dewars, Mason Shaw is another guy that I like as well, and then that back end is very underrated. Jonas Brodin is an excellent skater and just a really solid defenseman. Spurgeon, Brock Faber looked absolutely incredible coming right out of college. So yeah, kind of the same old song and dance for Minnesota. Perennial playoff team, a lot of fun to watch. But can they win a round? And that is the one question. It has been so long. Can they win a playoff round? It's kind of getting to the Maple Leafs with these guys. Obviously not now because they did win a round, but
first
now
round
we're kind of looking at Minnesota. When are they going to break through? But that being said, have them at number 3 and a lock to make the playoffs once again. All right, we'll move on to that number 4 spot. And Chad, I liked how you kind of separated the teams into separate tiers. So I think this is where it really gets interesting. So, Case, let's go to you for number 4 in the Central.
Well, you know what? I have 2 teams that I am flip-flop on at number 4, so I'm actually gonna reverse Uno card this and send it back to, let's hear Chad if you can convince me of one team being higher than the other.
Sure. So I mentioned that my team that I'm putting in 4th spot is in a tier of its own in terms of, and what I'm calling the tier is playoff hopeful, as opposed to the 3 teams in the tier below that I'm calling playoff bubble teams. So the number 4 spot, I have the Winnipeg Jets. Even though they've lost players like Wheeler and Pierre-Luc Dubois up front, I think their forward group is about the same. I don't think they're going to lose a ton of goals. Adding players like Iafallo, Velarde, and Kupari from the PLD trade, I think is going to be beneficial for them and might be able to spread out their offense a little bit more amongst their top 9 forward group. I think that's going to be great. A guy like Nino Niederreiter they'll have for the entire season, and they'll have another full year of Cole Perfetti, who is just getting older and better, and hopefully he can contribute a bit more offensively. So I think their top 9 is still really, really good, even after losing 2 key pieces up front. You know, they still have Ehlers, and they still have Scheifele, and they still have Connor. So it's not, I think, that big of a deal losing those 2 players. So I really like their offense. In terms of defense, I think they have a solid top 5, really. I mean, they don't have a lot of high-end scoring from their back end outside of a guy like Morrissey, but just reading through the names, guys like Pionk, Schmidt, Dillon, and DeMello, I think are all, you know, slot them in wherever you'd like, but 2 to 4 guys on most teams in the league. And that's their top 5 right there, consisting of those 5 players. And then, you know, the 6th guy isn't going to make or break your season. So I don't think that's that big of a deal. And then going to your goaltender, you know, as long as Connor Hellebuyck stays healthy, he hasn't had a bad season in the last decade. Like, he is one of the best goaltenders in the NHL year over year. You know, whether it's surface level stats or advanced stats, he is the guy who continues to put up incredible numbers, and he plays more than anyone else as well. Over the last, I believe it's 5 years, Hellebuyck has played the most games among any goalie in the regular season, including a guy like Andrei Vasilevsky, and it's not even close. So I think all of that combined just pointed me towards Winnipeg being this bubble playoff team. Sorry, I shouldn't say bubble playoff team, playoff hopeful, because they should make the playoffs with this lineup that they have. But, you know, given the fact that the Pacific is extremely competitive, it's going to be tough. But yeah, that's why I have Winnipeg at number 4. Thoughts on that, Casey?
Yeah, okay. I can feel good about my, you know, how I had the rankings going into this. I did have Winnipeg in this spot. I just don't know what to think of this team at all. Like, is Scheifele still getting traded? Is Hellebuyck still getting traded? That's still up in the air. So, you know, that is going to completely change my outlook of this team. And they're just always so mediocre despite being so good on paper. So I never know where to put this team. I think I say that every single year. Like, you could put the clips back to back for me saying, I don't know, they could be good and they could be bad. They did lose 2 of their top 5 scorers last year, so they're gonna need Velarde and Perfetti to step up big time. They're gonna need Ehlers to stay healthy. You said they have Nikolai Ehlers. It's like, do they? I feel like he hasn't played more than 50 games in the last 6 years, so they really need him to stick around. And then that top line is scary good. But I do like the ads. I think that Iafallo is one of those guys who's, you know, competent in the back end as well as can put the puck in the net, same as Velarde and Kupari. You know, there's a lot of potential there still. So we'll see what this can be. I like the top 9 when I look at the team outright, and the decor is always, it's steady. It's the same guys. You know, those 5 guys you mentioned are the same guys for the last 5 years. So I like it. And then, yeah, goaltending. Hellebuck's going to steal games for you. They brought in a good backup in Brossoit, you know, familiar face, as well as he had a good season last year. Really stepped up for Vegas in the wee hours of the season. So I do like the team. I really don't know where they're going to end up, but I'm totally willing to have them at 4.
Yeah, the Winnipeg Jets and the Calgary Flames, I think, are kind of in the same spot. We don't really know what to expect from both of these clubs. But Winnipeg had a much needed shakeup to the roster this summer. I think, especially parting ways with a guy like Blake Wheeler. I think that was huge. It was high time that needed to happen. Who knows what happens with Mark Scheifele? But we'll wait and see. And it's not a guarantee that Hellebuyck is as good as gone. You know, this team, I do see them being competitive. Personally, I have them in the 5 spot. but they will be competitive once again. That forward group doesn't look too bad at all, and I just don't know what to expect, but certainly a little more optimism and not as much noise around the Jets now after this offseason, and they're not doubling down once again on the same group. They have shaken it up a little bit. So, but personally, I had them in the number 5 spot, so I can get to the team that I had at the number 4 spot if you guys
let's hear it.
All right, so obviously, I'm good with conceding, putting the Jets at number 4, but personally, I've got the Nashville Predators, and I think that these two teams are they're similar in some ways. They've got the stud defenseman and the stud goaltender, but I have to give the edge to Nashville a little bit. Just looking at that with Roman Josi and Juuse Saros versus Morrissey and Hellebuyck, and really it comes down to the two defensemen. Morrissey had a ridiculous outlier season last year. Can he keep up that same production? We'll have to see. Although I will say about Nashville, that forward group up front, there's a lot more question marks with that forward group. I mean, it's looking like Ryan O'Reilly is going to be their first line center, and he's getting older and still a very good player, but the offense is declining a little bit. But I just look at a lot of their young players who really surprised us and played really well for them in the second half of the season, and this team almost squeaked into the playoffs. So I like the Predators to be able to carry over that momentum with the Novaks and the Evangelistas and the Tomasinos of the world, and the list goes on. I just think that they'll be able to carry over that momentum. There will be a lot of emphasis on the offensive side of the game with Andrew Burnett. I think it'll be a fun team to watch, and when you have guys like Josi and Saros and net, you always have a chance. So I'm giving the edge to Nashville a little bit in that 4 spot. What do you guys think?
I think that this shocked me. This absolutely shocked me because I don't even have them in the 5 spot. I think so poorly of this team, I guess you could say. Quickly, I want to touch on Josh Morrissey. I don't think he's going to be the guy he was last year, because even the last quarter of that season, I think he kind of regressed back to what we can expect from Josh Morrissey, which is still a number 1 defenseman on a team. But to get to Nashville, I'll start from the net out instead of going the other way, because obviously you guys know I love Saros. I think he's maybe the second best goalie in the league. So I could even think of giving him the edge over a Hellebuyck if you really forced me to. I'd be fine with that. So obviously I like the goaltending on this team. Again, just like Minnesota, no shocker, Nashville has a good D-core. It's been that way, forever, as long as I can remember. I really like the way that their D is set up, in that it's like one guy who can move the puck well and one guy who smashes bodies. And it's pretty simple. Peanut butter and jelly.
It's
all
so
the way,
true.
like 1, 2, 3. You got Josi and Shen. You got McDonough and Barry. You got Fabro and Carrier. Like, it's fantastic how they have it set up. I love the D-core. The forwards. I don't understand who is going to score goals on this team. Last year, their leading scorer was Roman Josi with 59 points. Obviously, there's some injuries. Forsberg was out for a while. He had played 50 games. I mean, I just don't get it. I don't know who's going to score. Harper, I want you to tell me their first 2 lines. How are their first 2 lines going to be set up?
Well, and again, it's going to be interesting, but I mean, it's got to be O'Reilly, Forsberg. Then who would that other winger be? Tomasino, maybe? So
that's a problem right there. The fact that you couldn't name another first line forward on this team, but continue. Sorry for interrupting. Who's the second line?
No, that's okay. And then Cody Glass would be your second line center. He did take a nice step last year and almost was a 40-point player. But and then you've got, Tommy Novak could be in that top 6. Gustav Nyquist as well.
Okay, so you named one second line player, in my opinion, in Thomas Novak. So I like the Cody Glass outlook that he's going to take another step, but the fact that you said he was almost a 40-point player and then said he was your 2C on this team, that's the problem for me. This forward core is not good, and I just don't know who's going to score goals, and it's just bleak if I put it plainly. So I definitely think this team is good if you stop at the defense. Like that's where I'm at with them.
Do you know what the forward core reminds me of? It reminds me of a worse version of the Dallas Stars. Because when I look at Nashville's forward group, it's a bunch of has-beens, guys like Ryan O'Reilly and Gus Nyquist. Compare those two players to, say, a Ben and Sagan, who are both better than those two players, but here's where their comparison comes in. Mixed with a bunch of young players who we don't really know exactly how they're going to pan out. Guys like Cody Glass, Evangelista, Tomasino, etc. And then you can compare that to Dallas with guys like Wyatt Johnston and J-Rob, who is a young player but is incredible. So I see the comparison there in terms of makeup, but obviously Dallas's is just way better and Nashville's is just not very good. So I'm with you, Case. Like, I don't know who's going to score on this team because if it's not Roman Josi, it's going to be tough. But that being said, I think their D-core and goaltending is good enough, and the fact that last year they had 92 points with a similar makeup up front, I think that alone, all of that considered, is good enough to get them into my number 5 spot. So although Harper had them at number 4, I think we have to go Winnipeg there, then Nashville at number 5. And so now I think we move on to talk about number 6, even though, Case, I know you didn't believe in Nashville at all at number 5.
Dude, you could have convinced me that they'd be 7. Like, I was waiting for someone to convince me of that. So, yeah, if we got to make a consensus here, I'm fine with it, but I want to be on record in saying that I don't think that this team is good. I'll take Wyatt Johnson over every player on this team except maybe Forsberg. That's where I'm at. And Wyatt Johnson's like the 6th or 5th best forward on Dallas.
Yeah.
Well, so
the comparison was for the makeup, and
I hear you. I was just thinking of the best team in this division versus this team. Like that's
right.
That's how I see it. I think the D-core is great. I just want to reiterate that. Love it, and I think the goalie is the second best in the league. But they're not going to win games 1-0. It's just not going to happen in today's NHL. So. We'll see.
Yeah. Also, to go against my position a little bit, looking at the D-core, outside of Josi, they have some good players, of course. Like Shen complements an offensive defenseman on that top pair well. He did that with Morgan Riley in the playoffs last year, so that's fine. McDonough and Barry, both guys who might be a little bit past their prime, and then Fabro and Carrier is whatever. So like the D-core is good, and I wrote that in my notes. It's good, not great. I like the makeup, but again, it's just not top tier. I do still think though that they're going to be in that playoff bubble tier that I have 3 teams in, and I would be willing to swap, but just given the fact that Harp had them at number 4, I think it makes sense for our consensus rankings.
Okay, cool. And just a final thing, I mean, the leading scorer on this team has to be Philip Forsberg. Like, he has to have a huge year, don't you think?
Well, unless Josi gets 100 again, or like close to he had 2 years ago.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's been the same story for years now. It's like, Philip Forsberg's going to be the leading scorer on this team. He's going to have 60 points. And it's like, that's Nashville.
Yeah.
Now, don't quote me on saying Forsberg's going to have 60 points this year. I think he'll have more than that. Mm-hmm. But I'm just saying, like, the last few years, that's the way it's always been. It's like, Forsberg had 66 points this year. He led the team in scoring for forwards by 20.
Yeah. And Roman Josi had 25 more than him.
Yeah. Now, there's that outlier season 2 years ago where Duchesne was sick again. But you know what I mean.
Yeah.
All right. So Winnipeg at 4, Nashville at 5. And Case, I know you don't like it, but that's what we got to go with. So anyway, let's go to 6. We've got 6, 7, and 8 here. 3 more teams to talk about to finish off the division. So Case, let's go back to you for number 6.
Yeah, I mean, I had St. Louis over Nashville. I do still like the makeup of this team, and I think they're going to retool and be back stronger than they were last year. It was very disappointing, but you're going to get a bounce back season out of a Kyrou, who was still good. I just mean he's going to be even better next year. Same as Robert Thomas. So you've got that high end scoring on this team, and then you're going to look for guys like Hayes and Vrana to come in and have an immediate impact. You're going to ask for a Jake Neighbors to take another step this year. And then there's still some other pieces on this team of guys who can score. I think Sundqvist had a pretty underrated season with Minnesota last year, as well as, Braden Shen is still a very solid player, and Buchnevich had his best season. So I like the makeup of the forwards. D is a below average D core. We'll see what happens with Torrey Krug. They failed at trading him already, so he probably doesn't feel very wanted on this team. So it'll be interesting to see what they do there. Outside of that, it's a lot of guys who are very competent on defense, but just nothing stands out to me. And then goaltending is a little scary, but it's voodoo. So Binnington could be, 2018 Binnington again. You never know. Obviously, I don't feel very confident in their goaltending, but I think that the forward core is so much better than Nashville, and then the defense is good enough. So I had this team at 5 in my rankings, but I can definitely put them in at 6 for you guys.
Well, we will see, because I have St. Louis in the number 7 spot, actually, and there's a team on the hat that Harper is wearing that's going in the number 6 spot for me, and that's the Arizona Coyotes. But before we get to that, let's chat about St. Louis a little bit more. Case, I like the points you made about their forward group, even though they're losing players like Ryan O'Reilly and Nola Chari for a full season now going forward. Adding Kevin Hayes is going to be nice to sort of stabilize their top 6 forward group, I would say, down the middle.
Dude, that 1, 2, 3C, Thomas, Shen, Hayes.
Yeah.
I like it.
Yeah, I guess, Hayes would be the 3C. But yeah, I mean, it's pretty solid. I mean, even though he was overpaid in Philadelphia, he's still a good player. And adding a guy like Vrana for a full season, who had 14 points in 20 games last year, that's going to be solid as well, as long as there's not any off-ice shenanigans with him. We don't really know the extent of why he's been up and down between the NHL and AHL. He clearly has the talent to play, so let's just hope he's able to stay in the NHL all year and have a good season. But yeah, their top 6, their top 9 really is solid. I like their forward group. That being said, I hate their defense and I hate their goaltending. Binnington as a number 1 is not good enough. We've seen now for consecutive seasons that he hasn't been even as good enough to be in a tandem situation, and they don't have a capable backup. They have, what's his name, Hofer Hofer.
Oh,
yeah,
Joel
Hofer
as the backup.
He's not a cow.
Goalie of the future, though, in St. Louis. He's gonna be good.
Yeah, but that doesn't matter right now. You can't have a goalie who's not good be in a tandem situation, and you can't have him as just a backup because your starter's no good in the first place. I know it's a lot to put on goaltending, and that isn't the main reason why I have this team in number 7, but it is a factor because I don't like the makeup of it at all. I think they should have gone out and got like a good backup goalie. A guy like Marc-Andre Fleury would have made a ton of sense. He's not great, but he can at least push Binnington and have a bit of that internal competition and stability back there. I think that would have been great. But their decor, overpaid, old, slow. I hate it. And just want to compare this team in every position to Arizona. I think I take Arizona all day. I take their tandem situation in net, even though, a guy like Vejmelka is a bit unproven, though he was really good last season. And a guy like Ingram, again, a bit unproven, though he was good in stretches. I still take that over Binnington as your number 1, expected to play 60 plus games. On defense, I take Arizona's decor, adding guys like Dumba and Dursey really solidify that for me. Victor Soderstrom playing more games this season, I think, will be important for their offense from the back end. And then up front, I just like Arizona's forwards better. So I have them at number 6, St. Louis at number 7. Harper, I see that you probably agree. What are your thoughts on that ranking?
Well, first of all, on the Blues, I just think that it's another retool year for St. Louis, and it's not going to be long before they're a contender again. But they had an excellent draft, and I just think that they've lost a lot of key pieces along the way, and they're still going to take some time to get back into playoff contention and being a contender again. I think that, losing the Petrangelos and the O'Reillys and pieces like that has kind of hurt this team a little bit. And I'm with you, Chad, all the way, man. I don't like Binnington, the goaltending situation there, and I don't like the back end. Parayko had a terrible season last year. Justin Falk is a good defenseman, but he's overpaid. Torrey Krug, same thing. Scandella's been banged up. Nick Leddy, overpaid and aging as well. It's just it's not good enough. So I too have the Arizona Coyotes in that 6th spot. I know, surprise, surprise, and St. Louis in that number 7 spot. So we can move on and talk about the Coyotes now. Chad, I know you did a little bit. Do you want me to talk about the Oats a little bit?
Well, I'll just come back because I feel like I didn't talk about their forward group as much as I wanted to. I just wanted to add as well that adding a player like Jason Zucker makes a lot of sense up front. I feel like that adds to their top 6 or top 9, wherever they want to play them, and gives them some leadership. And then a player like Alex Kerfoot for depth at the same contract that he was signed to in Toronto. I think they really like that, having a versatile player who has sort of been around the block and isn't just a guy to chuck into your lineup like some of the other players they had, in years past. And then, of course, getting Logan Cooley from school, I think is going to be an incredible add for them. I expect him to be one of, if not the best rookie in the NHL this year. I think he's ready to take on that role. And then just guys like Gunther and Jack McBain being a year older and ready for more opportunity. I just like their forward group so much. And yeah, adding that on top of, how much I like the additions they made on the back end, I just think that this team is in a better position to not contend, but at least take a step and push for a playoff spot this year. And that's why I have them as a playoff bubble team. But yeah, so that's what I wanted to say about their offense.
Well, again, surprise, surprise. I totally agree with all of that, and I could even, I wanted to put this team in the 5th spot, and obviously we're not going to do that. But look, I agree. This team is a playoff bubble team. They took a nice step forward last year, surprised a lot of us with 70 points. They're well coached. Clayton Keller is a star now in this league. They've got a good young core. Michelli, Krause, Nick Schmaltz is a great player, very underrated, I think. Barrett Hayton took a big step forward, and like a lot of their homegrown guys that they've either drafted or they've traded for or brought in off waivers or whatever. And, Chad, you mentioned the additions of Dumba and Dursey on the back end, which is huge, but another year for J.J. Moser, who I think has very quickly become one of the most underrated D in the NHL. Juuso Välimäki, who was claimed off waivers, he's fit like a glove with this team. The addition of Alex Kerfoot up front as well. This team is going to be a lot of fun to watch. They're big. They crash and bang. They've got some offense, and they're just a hungry team. And I think they take a step forward. And I could see the Coyotes being a Buffalo or Ottawa team of last year this season, and kind of be in that bubble, and and be close. I don't think they're going to make the playoffs this year, but playoffs in 24-25, but another step forward getting into the mid-80s range. I could see that for the Coyotes, so I love that.
Okay. Well, I don't even know where I put my key to unlock them from the 7th spot in this division. So I guess I'll have to look around to appease to you guys, but I'm just not there for this team. I think obviously they've taken some steps on the forward core. They brought in Zucker and Kerfoot and Bjugstad, and all of that's going to be fine and dandy. Logan Cooley's going to be a big impact to this team, and I'm excited for that. I also hope that Dylan Gunther can be a big impact as well, be a mainstay here now, but I still think that they lack a 1 and 2C. I always like to build my team from the center and out. That's why I like St. Louis more than Arizona, is because they have a 1, 2, and 3C, whereas Arizona doesn't have a first or second line center, in my opinion. I think Barrett Hayton did take a step last year. I still think he's a 3C on most teams. And then Logan Cooley is going to be one of those guys who comes in and is going to be playing wing most of the time. I fully think that that's going to be the case. It's going to be the same as Jack Hughes or, pick your young, small forward with offensive talent. He's going to be on the wing. So I don't think they have the center. The center core is not there for me. I do like their additions. I think the offense is going to be fun to watch, but I don't think it's there yet. And I don't think that you could have convinced me that this D-core is not shit. I just, that's where I'm at with it. Like that, I don't know. I can hear the JJ Moser underrated comments. I think that makes sense. I think that he's a good defenseman and one of the only bright spots on the back end. Matt Dumba, he's their number one guy now, and we just said that he's coming from a team that's not even going to notice he's gone. So I don't know, the argument's there. Sean Dursey is another good ad. Obviously, I think he's going to log a lot of minutes and he's going to be QB1, but we'll see. I think that the only way that he's been solidified as an NHL player right now is seeing him as the second pair in LA, kind of getting, sheltered time once Doughty and Anderson are off the ice. So I'll be interested to see him kind of getting a little bit more exposure. We'll see if he takes a step back or if he takes it by the reins. I hope he succeeds because I like the player, but I don't know what that's going to be. And then the rest of the D-core doesn't interest me at all. So it's really not there for me. I know you guys are laughing and smirking, but it's just not. I'm not. You can't convince me of that. And then the goaltending is just okay, which, I mean, it's neither here nor there. If one thing I've learned in fantasy is that Karel Vejmelka can only win games he should definitely not win.
Yep.
When he's playing in a game that, they have a chance, he's just kind of average. But if he's playing
the Leafs
Vegas
on
Golden
Saturday
Knights
night,
or the Toronto Maple Leafs on Hockey Night in Canada, he's going to be good. Mm-hmm. Other than that, Connor Ingram, he's a fine goalie, but they have a 1B, 1C situation going on here, or maybe 1B and 1 or 2A. What do you call it? Connor Ingram is just very much a backup goalie, and he's probably a third goalie on 75% of the teams in the league. Karel Vejmelka is a backup goalie on most, but he is definitely the starter of Arizona, and I like watching him because he's a wild card. I don't know. I had them so locked at number 7, but I guess they'll be our number 6 team.
Yeah, listen, guys, we're arguing about one spot here. What if, we're talking about St. Louis versus Arizona. What if one or two players on St. Louis gets hurt and Arizona, one or two players does extremely well in taking a step, moving forward? So many things can happen over the course of an 82 game season. I do think putting Arizona 6 and St. Louis 7 is sort of the one hot take we've had so far in terms of our consensus rankings, but it's a bet I'm willing to make, and that's why, and clearly you are too, Harper, and that's why we have it that way. But so that's how we'll finish out 6 and 7, Arizona 6, St. Louis 7. All we have now to talk about is the number 8 spot, and that's Connor Bedard and his gang of merry men. So why don't we get into that? And Case, why don't you just start talking about them quickly, and then we'll wrap up.
Why does this team look like an expansion team? Why? Historic team, dynasty team in the 2010s, but now they're an expansion team. They have old guys filling out their bottom six that, you know, are easy pickings in an expansion draft. You have the heavy contracts of decent players that you take on as a favor, and maybe they picked up some picks, so they got a Taylor Hall and a Seth Jones from other teams somehow, and then they're rookies that they drafted in Connor Bedard and Lucas Reichel. That's what this team is. It's an expansion team. They're full of third line players. So I mean, that's my comments of the forward core. Defense, probably the worst D-core in the league.
Yeah,
I don't know if that's a bold take. I don't think it is by any means. And goaltending isn't far behind. Probably the worst tandem in the league. So, yeah, that's Chicago.
I think the goaltending comment is probably the most true one, honestly. I think it's the worst tandem in the league. Peter Mrazek is your starter, and Soderblom, I guess, is your backup. If we're talking, you know, case we're trying to do the letters and numbers for Arizona, if we're talking letters and numbers, I think we're looking at 2-3 C's here. And I'm not talking about third line centers. I'm talking about goaltenders here, Mrazek and Soderblom. So yeah, it's not a good team, but that's okay because they're rebuilding. They got the best player available for his age group in the entire world in this most recent draft that Gary Bettman definitely didn't rig in Connor Bedard. And they'll get a good pick next year as well, where there's some pretty damn good players available too. So if you're a Chicago fan, you know, it's going to be rough, but in the future, this team is going to be really good. And, you know, you're going to be able to watch Connor Bedard for the next 3 seasons at minimum. So that's a good thing.
I think that, no doubt, this team is in the bottom of this division, and they're not going to be very good, but they will be better than they were last season, of course, with Bedard, Taylor Hall. Taylor Radish is a very good kind of underrated player for this team. We'll see if a guy like Kevin Korchinski makes the team out of camp. He is definitely their second best prospect and has the potential to be an elite defenseman in this league. Goaltenders too. I mean, Mrazek and Soderblom. Jackson Stauber also showed something in a limited sample size last year for this team. So yes, they're not going to be very good at the bottom of this division. Another lottery year for the Hawks, and they'll be in the Celebrini, Yzerman sweepstakes and all that. But I think this team is going to surprise some people and may win more games than we think, just with the injection of Bedard and a full year for Reichel, and we'll see if Korchinski can get on the team, and you know, what kind of a year does Taylor Hall have playing with Bedard and Radish, and Athanasiou is back, and some of these guys, and they're very well coached as well by Luke Richardson. So I'm excited to see the Blackhawks. I really am, but no doubt they're in the bottom of this division, but it's not going to be long before they're good again.
Yeah, well, they had 59 points last year. It's pretty hard to be worse than that, even as a tanking team. So, yeah, I could see them in the even 70-point range. Wouldn't shock me, to be honest.
Exactly.
So, but yeah, I think that does it for the Central, no?
Yep.
Yes, it sure does. All right, there we go. That's a wrap on the Western Conference as a whole, the Pacific and the Central. And now we get into the fun stuff. We get into it's all fun, but we get into the East next week, starting with the Metro, of course, and then the Atlantic. So that's going to be fantastic. And thanks so much for listening to this one, episode 181. We'll be back with you next week when we talk about the Metro. Take care.
This has been another episode of Boys in the Booth with Harper Cody, Chad Melbourne, and Casey Abrams. Connect with the Boys in the Booth on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube at Boys in the Booth. Visit boysinthebooth.com for show details. And don't forget, you can become a patron of the podcast for just $1 a month at patreon.com/boysinthebooth.